Welcome back to another Fusion 360 tutorial. So when we last left off, we went ahead and we cut this slot into our 123 block. And what we're going to do now is we want to go ahead and add some text, which we can either emboss or engrave. Embossing meaning it's going to stick out, engraving meaning we're going to cut it in. Both are types of extrusions for our case. So what we want to do is we want to go create sketch. And it's a little tricky. We could actually just choose the face plane of our 123 block. But to do it correctly, let's go inside of here. Make sure you get the bottom of the slot that we cut. So we'll click on that. And it's a good idea to zoom in, make sure it's filling your screen so that it's easy to work on. And to add text to this, we're going to go ahead and choose the Create tab. And about 2/3 of the way down, you'll see text next to the letter A. Go ahead and click on that. Fusion has updated this a bit compared to what it was. I did a tutorial on this earlier. It's actually Fusion 360 Part 8. And it was a little more cumbersome to use at that point in time. Since then, they've made some nice updates to it. So now, when we use it, we're actually going to create a text box just as you would in any other text editing program or graphics program, rather. And if I pick up the end of the slot, this is where the radius meets the line, and then go down here and snap to the other one. Right, I've got a nice little text box there. And the convenience here is that it's also going to help us center the text inside of that box. Inside of my text menu, we're going to leave it set on regular text. You can use text on a path now, which is also nice. I've done that for some parts. But for our instance, let's keep it simple. And for my students, we type in our last name. You can do all capital letters or lowercase or whatever you choose. And we're going to select a font. Now, one of the things I always want to point out with font is that Gothic fonts work the best, typically. Okay, and a Gothic font, of course, doesn't have these serifs on, these lines on the tops and bottoms of letters. Now, in this instance, this is American typewriter, and because it's a fairly simple font, it works pretty well. But where we run into trouble is when people try and use scripts or more ornate fonts. It doesn't always like them. It doesn't like to extrude them. So try and stick to simpler fonts if at all possible. And if you're going to be using something like a CNC mill to create these letters for real, um, you're not really going to want something like this anyway, in most cases. You could technically 3D print this stuff, though, relatively easily. It is possible. So let's find something that we'll use. Maybe we'll just go up here and, I don't know, we'll use Apple Gothic. That's what's there. You do, in some cases, have the capability to make it bold, or you can make it italic. In this instance, neither of those are available. And then for changing the text height, unlike the printing industry, this is doing it in inches, which is kind of typical for CAD and technical drawings. And you're going to have to play with the height to make it appear the way you want. So if I go something like 0.15 inches, it gets a little bit bigger. We'll try 0.16. I'd say that's a good size, kind of has some good space around it. And then character spacing, you can stretch out if you so choose. I'm not going to do that. It fits nicely. All right, we have no need to flip it. You can change exactly where it's positioned within the text box. Okay, so justify left, justify right, center justify, just like any document program. And then, of course, we can also do our alignment from top, center, or bottom. In our instance, we want to justify center and we want to use align in the middle, and that will place it right in the middle of our slot. It's as easy as clicking OK. And that's all you need to do for the text. You can select Finish Sketch, so big green check mark. And then we'll select our house button up here to flip back into isometric. And you'll notice that the text is just printed on the surface of the block. Now, in order to extrude it, for whatever reason, Fusion likes to pick up this slot when we go to extrude. You have to turn it off before you can select the text. So when I choose extrude, you're going to notice that the entire slot is highlighted. If you do that, you'll get a solid slot moving in or out. So select outside of your text, but inside of the slot to turn that off, and then hover over the text. It'll turn dark blue. And now we have a couple options. We can emboss the text. So if I type in something like 0.05, we get a nice extrusion there, and I click OK. And you'll see that the text, of course, is popping out of the block. All right. And again, you could 3D print this very easily. In fact, the text in Fusion 360 tends to print pretty well, unless they're really narrow letters. or again, unless it's a crazy font that the 3D printer has trouble with. If we revert back and we choose extrude again, we can also, we'll deselect the slot, choose the text again. We can engrave it, and I might go minus, say, 0.03 inches, so 30 thousandths of an inch. And we have some nice engraved text in there. Again, doable on something like a CNC mill, or you could 3D print this as well. And of course, the fun one that everybody wants to try is we can also click extrude, and we can deselect the slot again and select the text, and we can actually pull it, if I zoom out a little bit, the whole way through the block. And when you do that and click OK, you'll notice when I turn the block, we can now see right through it. The only thing you need to be aware of with this is this idea that this is an impossible object. And what I mean by that is if we take a look at where the letters are, the centers of the O's, the part of the R, okay, those points, the centers of the B's would all fall out because there's nothing there to actually hold them in. All right, so you would have an empty letter in here. You would get around that by doing what you see on stencils, where you would add a little web, perhaps up in here, maybe one on here, one in here. Doesn't look quite as neat, but you could do it if you wanted to. But it is a neat thing in theory to show students. Just a little fun, happy side note too. On a 3D printer, it would definitely print these letters as they sit right now. But when you took the block off the 3D printer, these would stay behind. So same issue. So I hope that helps with extruding and embossing text. There are some other features that are a little more advanced, but this will get you going for at least putting text on your projects.